Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced, and welcome to another video about, well, React Router. And so in the last video, we kind of explored this concept of routers, of loaders, and being able to load data before a component renders. Now there's another concept in the React Router world called actions. Okay, so basically when you think about it, if you take a look at like traditional HTML forms, okay, so what I'll do is I'll just create a quick scratch HTML file right here. New file scratch.html. Okay, so traditionally you would have forms that kind of were set up like this, would be like form, and then there'd be inputs in the middle of it. And your traditional HTML form would have an action property. And the action property would represent what route on your server your form would submit to, and then they would handle like the backend logic. And then you would specify like a method, which would either be get or post. So get, if you were going to basically send it to another page, and you wanted all the form data to be sort of in the URL, and post if you wanted to submit it secretly to the server, so that way they can like create a new post or something. Okay, so that's the way HTML works. So React Router tried to lean into that, and what they did is they created a form component that sort of replicates this behavior, making working with forms in React a lot easier. Okay, so essentially what you would do is that you would, instead of an action pointing to a route on your server, it points to a route in your front end from React Router. And basically what happens is that route can then be assigned a action function, and that function will run when the form is submitted. That's essentially the pattern. Okay, so let's show you an example. Okay, so I'm going to go back, let's go to page 3, and here in page 3, I'm going to import a few things from React Router. So I'm going to import the form component. So note it's capital F form, not lowercase f form like the form. And then it's also going to be a not redirect here. Yeah, just form. Okay, from React Router DOM. Okay, so essentially the way this form component works is you would just create a form. Okay, so we'll say page 3, actually I'll just write the form right below this. It would look just like a normal form. I would have inputs in it. So I would have like an input of type text that says, that has a name of first input. And then maybe I'll have a second one. Okay, and we'll call this second input. Okay, and then we'll have a button for you to submit the form. Cool. So then in the form, what you would do is you would submit a new action property, and the action would tell you which route. So say slash, submit form. Okay, and then you would specify a method. And generally, if you want to trigger an action function, you would use a post. You would use a get if you want to send it to like another page. Yeah, and then basically all the properties would be put as URL search params, which will show you an example of that as well. Okay, so first we'll do this post version, so you can see how that works. And for that, we need a action, so we need an action function. I'll do that in my actions.js. Okay, so here I'm going to import something called redirect. That's just going to allow us to redirect the user back to another route once we're done handling the form submission. Okay, and then I just create a function, export, and I'm just going to call this the page 3 action because it's for our page 3 route. Okay, and very much like the loader, export function page 3. Okay, very much like the loader, this can receive the params and the request object. So you can still get all that stuff. Okay, so request, params. So if there was any params, I'd be able to access those params. Okay. Also, I can access the request object. So params, we already talked about how that works, so you can have an idea of what I'd be able to do with that. But with the request object, I would be able to get the form data. Okay, so what I would do is I would want to get the data from the form, so I'd create a new form data object. And usually what I would do is I would do like new form data, and then I would pass in the form. I would have like a variable with the form, and I'd pass it in there. But since this is a request object, the request object actually has a form data function inside of it that if we invoke, returns a promise with the form's data. So in that case, we probably want to make this an async function, so that way we can just await the form data. Okay? Cool. Awesome. Okay, so now we got back the form data. Now what we can do is we can console.log properties from the form data. So we'll say form data dot get, because again, form data objects have a get property to get the individual properties in there. And then again, in our page, was it page 3 actually? It was called first input and second input. So we'll use that. So console.log first input, and then we'll console.log second input. And then once we're done doing that, we'll return the result of redirecting the user. So you have to return it, and we'll redirect the user back to page 4. Why not? Okay. So that's what our action function looks like. So essentially what it's going to do is just going to get the data from the form, log it, and then redirect back to page 4. So now for this action to work, I have to attach it to my router. So in my router, I will go import page 3 action. And then on the page 3 route, actually, technically we submitted, so it has to be in a route named after what we called it. So if we go back to page 3, we said we're submitting it to submit form. So I have to create a route called submit form. So back to my router, I need to create another route here of path equals / submit form. And then here's where I would attach the action prop and say, hey, here's our page 3 action. Okay. So now when this form on page 3 submits, since it's a post request, it's going to go to my router, look for a route called submit form, and then run the function that's labeled action. Okay. So we should see some console logs over here. Actually, some console logs in the terminal. So let me just open the terminal over here so you can see that. So I hit page 3. I type in like cheese bread. And if I type in cheese bread and I hit submit. Okay. Now initially, what it did was, we see that it console logged, so it did run. No routes matched for page 4. Oh, because we don't have a page 4 route because it's not page 4 param. Okay, that my bad. So let me go back to my actions, fix that. Send it to page 2. Okay. And then we go back over here. So if I go back to page 3 again, I type in like cheese bread, I hit submit. See, it sends me to page 2 and we see the console log. So it did exactly what our action said it would do. It got the data of the form. It logged the data from the form, which we see right here. And then it sent us to page 2, which we see right there. So that's basically how actions work. So typically, like if you had a backend API, what you would do is here, probably in these actions, is when you would take the data from the form and make requests. Like you would do a post request to create a thing, or a put request to update a thing. Essentially, we would handle all that logic here. So here's where all those API requests for like delete, post, and put would happen. And you would get the data from the form, and ta-da. Okay, so that's when you do a post, when you do an action as a post. But what happens if you do an action as a get? Okay. Now, in this case, let me do, let's go back to our page 4 or page 3, and let's do another form. Okay, and this one's going to submit to page 1. And this one's going to be a get. Okay, so you can see the difference in how it's going to behave. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to page 3 and we see the second form. So I type in cheese, bread, and now when I hit submit, see, it just takes me to page 1. So you see no action gets called, but look at the URL. See, when you make a get with the form, what it does, it appends the details of the form as a query string at the end of your URL. These are also referred to as search params. So they're not like your URL params, which are inside the URL, because technically anything, the question mark going forward is not part of the URL, it's technically part of the query string. So I could access those. So what I can do is now I can go back to my page 1, and there's a special hook for this. So if I would just go to import, again from React Router would be use search params. Okay, and then I should be able to access those params. So say const search params lowercase equals the result of use search params. And then let's console log use search params. Okay, and you see here, when we went to that page, we have this search params object. Okay, and the first property it has is just basically the size, and then again, it's basically an iterable. Okay, so not the most useful thing, the way it works off the top of the bat. Now let me just check the prototype so we can see what kind of functions are on it. Okay, is there a get function? Size 2. Okay, yeah, okay, so you still use the indexes. Okay, so if I were to do 0, was it log the first one? Size 2, no. Okay. Dot entries, let's try that. Iterator. Yeah, it's going to want us to iterate. So what probably the easiest thing I can do, let me see if I can actually do this. Can I just spread this into an array? And if I do that, I get this. Nope. So it does notice that there's 2 things in there, but I want to see how I get access to the 2 things. Find for each join keys map pop push reverse slice some sort. Let's try values. So prototype array, URL search params. Second thing is next init, navigate options. Okay. So let's try this. For let item of search params console.log item. What do I get? Great. Okay. My bad. Okay. So technically what you're supposed to do with this particular hook is that technically this doesn't just give you back those params, it gives you back 2 things. It's like state. So essentially it's giving you back search params and set search params. That's what this hook is giving you back. And this is what I was looking for. This is the object that I actually wanted. Okay. So then basically what I'm able to do now is I can say search params dot get, and I can go get first input. Okay, and again, if I console.log that, okay, let me just scroll way down here, and you can see that's working right there. You can see the cheese log, and then I do the second one, second input. Okay, perfect. And see what we can console log both of those. So the point being is that depending on how you set up your form, if I set up my form to submit to a route as a post, then I would use that form data in an action function, which I then attach to a route. So we did like we did right over here, where we attach that action function over here. Okay, and that function runs whenever a form does a post request to that route. But when we do a get request, so again, back to our form, we did a get request to page 1, it didn't trigger an action function. What it did is that it attached all the data from the form as a query string, which you can then access using search params. So if you use the useSearchParams hook, then you can, again, use search params and then again destructure the two things out of it, like state, and then you can just grab the search params. And the search params, kind of like the form data object, has a get method for getting the values inside the object. So yeah, that's basically how you can handle forms in React Router. Okay, again, there's a lot more to React Router all over the place, but this should get you started on sort of using React Router in your applications, and then you can read the docs to get deeper and deeper and learn about things like the navigate function and fetchers and all sorts of other good stuff. But with that, I'll leave you at that. I'll see you later. Have a great day and enjoy.